Hi everyone, it's Annette and welcome back to Cotto Verde. Today we're going to pot on the cuttings that I took a couple of weeks ago. In fact, I took them on the 21st of July and it's now the end of August, so it's about 5 weeks ago, and I can tell that some of the cuttings are definitely rooting and I can see new growth on others. And I have had one lot of cuttings, the Brachyglotis, that may well not have taken. They're not looking super healthy. So I'm going to show you what to look for with your cuttings and how to tell whether they have rooted or not and whether they're ready to be potted on, and I'm also going to show you how to do that. So one of the easiest ways to be able to tell whether your cuttings have rooted and are now ready to be potted on is if they have got roots coming out of the bottom of the pot, and this particular pot here has got roots coming out of the bottom. The other way to be able to tell that your cuttings are ready is if you've got new growth on the top, and I can tell in this pot that there's new growth here because these leaves are lighter green and smaller, and so this is new growth on this particular cutting. So this is my Veronicastrum alba. I did have 5 cuttings originally, but over the process of the last few weeks one of them kind of wilted a bit, and so I just plucked it out because I didn't want it to get diseased and then spread disease to the other cuttings. So that's why I've now only got 4, but 4 is plenty. So with my lavender, the lavender hasn't got any roots coming out of the bottom, but I can see that the lavender has definitely got new shoots where I pinched it out, and so it's definitely growing. So I'm going to have a look at the lavender today as well. With other cuttings it's a little bit harder. There aren't any roots coming out of the bottom of the Pittosporum, and I'm not 100% certain that there's new growth on the top, even though some of the leaves are lighter. I have a feeling they were lighter in the beginning anyway. So I am going to have a look at one of these to see whether they're ready to be potted on. I also have some rosemary that I'm going to check today, and the rosemary also does not have any roots coming out of the bottom. But it's a very deep pot, so I'm not sure that that's definitely an indicator, and I think that the rosemary has also got new shoots growing where I pinched it out. I can definitely see new shoots, so I have a feeling that there will be some roots there too. There's no immediate rush to pot on your cuttings. It's easier to do it if you do it slightly sooner, because then the roots aren't all tangled up in amongst each other. So if you catch them at a particular time before they're all intermingled, it's just easier to separate them without harming them. But you could definitely leave them 6 to 8 weeks if you wanted before you tip them out and check. So I'm going to pot all my cuttings on into these 9cm pots. You definitely don't want to put them into an enormous pot. I wouldn't pot one cutting on into another of these litre pots. It's just going to be too much room for that particular cutting. So pot them on into something smaller, but make sure that it's deep enough so that you can put it at the same depth that it was in the original pot. And I'm going to be using the Melcourt Silver Grey peat-free compost. It's just an ordinary multi-purpose compost with a bit of extra goodness. It is peat-free, which I really like because it's going to help our environment if we save the peat bogs. So if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that I use that. With the lavender and with the rosemary, those like really good drainage, and so I'm going to add extra grit to that compost. So I'm probably going to do 50% grit and 50% compost, and I'll show you how I do that. With the others I may just add a tiny bit of grit just to give the roots a little bit more drainage, but you could just put it straight on into compost if you don't have any grit. Or you could use something like perlite, that also helps with drainage. Oh, and I will link the compost below in the description if you'd like to take a look at the compost that I'm using and see whether you'd like to get any. So the tools I'm going to be using today are my trusty little mini trowels. I will link these in the description below as well. The other thing I'm going to be using are my little dibbers, so I find this stick particularly helpful for helping separate the roots without harming them. I'm also going to be using my Felco snips. I really like these snips because they've got a really pointy end, and the reason that I might need my snips is if I haven't already pinched out the cutting, then I'm going to pinch it out today because that will help it branch. This is quite a good time to be potting on your cuttings because the weather's still quite warm in our hemisphere, and so your cuttings are going to have time to root in and put on a little bit of growth before winter sets in and we get some frosts. So remember not to overfill your pots because you need space for when you water your seedlings, because you're going to be overhead watering these from now on. So the first cuttings that I'm going to tip out are the ones where I can definitely see roots on the bottom. These are my Veronicastrum alba. And so the easiest way to do this is just to give your pots a little squeeze, maybe tap them a bit. You want it to be quite delicate, and then I'm just going to tip the pot up and slide it out. And look at those roots. And so here you can see my cutting with the roots. That's one cutting. And there's my other cutting. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of compost in the bottom, like that, and then I'm going to place my cutting inside, and then I'm going to tip compost around it, and I think that's going to be easier in this instance than dibbing a hole. And so I'm just going to do all of these in exactly the same way. So you can actually see that further up the stem where I took off some other leaves, this node here is also producing roots. So now I'm going to do the Penstemon mother of pearl, and this was also, I took these cuttings again on the 21st of July, so it's been a few weeks, but I can't see any roots coming out of the bottom, but I do believe that there is new growth on the top. So I'm going to take a look and just see whether one of these is ready, and if it is, I will have a look at all of them. And there aren't any roots. So I'm going to return that to its little bed and give it more time. So the Penstemons aren't ready, which is absolutely fine. They can just sit there for a little bit longer. So now I'm going to have a look at the lavender. These were also cuttings that I took on the 21st of July. So let's have a look at one of them that I think has got new growth and see whether we've got any roots down there. Oh, it's got some little roots. So I could have left these for a little bit longer, but now that I've disturbed it, I think I'm going to put these on today. So what I'm going to do is make some super gritty compost mix up in this bucket here. So however much compost I put in, I'm going to put in the same amount of grit. So I'm just going to take my cuttings out again. You can see tiny little roots there. I don't want to damage those new little roots. So because they don't have a big root system, what I'm going to do is reduce the stress on these little cuttings by just taking off some of the foliage, because there's just too much there, and I'm worried that my little cuttings are not going to do well. So I'm just going to take off some of that, leaving enough for it to still photosynthesize. So I'm going to take a look at the rosemary and see whether that has rooted, but it's possible that it's not done any better than the lavender. Oh, tiny little roots. So because the lavender has also got very small roots, I'm actually just going to give it another week or two, and I'm not going to pot those on. Let's have a look at the Pittosporum. And again, that has not got any roots, so I'm going to leave that. I mean, you can see that it's looking super healthy. I felt like these were new shoots, but they're obviously not. So because the Veronicastrum has got a really good root system, I'm going to water them and leave them outside now without a propagator lid, but I'm going to put them in my cold frames just to protect them for a few days, and then I shall just slowly acclimatise them to the outside, and then I'll just be able to leave them outside in a safe, protected environment, somewhere, you know, near the sheds or something, so that they can grow on a bit. With the lavender, because it has got much smaller roots, and I'm a little bit concerned that I may have done that a week or two early, what I'm going to do is continue with those and keep them in my propagator. So I'm going to water everything in, but I'm just going to keep the lid on those, and hopefully that will help the plant retain some moisture whilst it still grows its root system. And then in a week or two I should be able to bring those out into my cold frames in exactly the same way I have with the Veronicastrum. And then all the others that I've kept in their cutting pots, I'm just going to return them back to my nice warm kitchen with the propagator lids on, because they definitely need a lot longer. I'd say the lavender probably needs another week or two, and in the rosemary, I'd say the rosemary probably needs another week or two in the same way that the lavender does. I just haven't potted it on yet, and it looks like the Penstemons and the Pittosporum are just going to take a little bit longer, which is absolutely fine. So this is the Brachyglotis. It's looking a little bit brown, but there are also some leaves that are healthy, so I'm going to give this a chance. So I thought it would be interesting to show you how to do everything and, you know, what goes on, and it also shows you that things do take their time to make those little roots, and not to worry about it, but just keep going and make sure that you always take out any little cuttings that are looking a little bit sad, and, you know, just protect the ones that are in there looking healthy by removing anything that might get diseased. I hope it's been interesting and useful for you, and if you'd like to see more and see how these cuttings do in the next few weeks, then do subscribe to my channel, and don't forget I've linked all the tools in the description below. If you'd like to purchase any of those, you can just follow my affiliate links. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. One of the easiest ways to be able to tell whether your cuttings have rooted and are now ready to be potted on is just wait for the plane to go over.